In 1965, astronaut John Young smuggled a corned beef sandwich onto a spacecraft, and NASA was so furious about the crumbs floating into the instrument panels that Congress held an actual hearing about it. A sandwich, a single corned beef sandwich, nearly derailed the American space program. Hi, my name is Carter, and this is Retro USA Chronicles, where we dig up the stories nobody bothered to save. Number 14 on this list was so disgusting that astronauts begged Mission Control to scratch it from the menu permanently. And number 2 was requested by nearly every single crew that flew between 1970 and 1985. Hit that subscribe button before we launch, because what these men and women ate while floating 200 miles above the Earth will change everything you thought you knew about the space race. Let's count down. Number 25. Toothpaste tube meals. Before NASA figured out that human beings still wanted to feel like human beings at mealtime, early engineers handed astronauts food in aluminum tubes that looked exactly like toothpaste, applesauce, beef and vegetables, pureed chicken. All of it was squeezed directly into the mouth from a nozzle, like you were caulking a bathtub. On paper, the logic made sense. No crumbs, no spills, no floating debris clogging instrument panels at 32,000 feet per second. The reality was something else entirely. Astronaut Wally Schirra described squeezing a tube of pureed beef into his mouth during the Mercury program and feeling like he had completely lost his dignity in front of the entire nation. The texture was wrong. The temperature was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. And the worst part was that the tubes were not even labeled clearly in the early days. So you might squeeze what you thought was peaches and get beef stew instead. That happened more than once. Number 24, Tang. Tang did not actually go to space first. Let that sink in for a moment. The powdered orange drink existed since 1957, sitting on grocery store shelves largely ignored, until NASA started mixing it into astronaut water supplies during the John Glenn Mercury mission in 1962. After that, the marketing machine took over, and Tang became the unofficial taste of the space age, even though astronauts mostly tolerated it rather than loved it. Buzz Aldrin was famously unenthusiastic. The powder mixed into rehydrated water that had been stored in rubberized bags, and the rubber taste bled into everything. Every single drink, for days. Imagine orange juice that also tastes like a balloon. That was breakfast in space for the better part of a decade. Number 23, bacon squares. Here is where things get surprisingly pleasant. NASA food scientists in the mid-1960s developed compressed bacon squares that were bite-sized, shelf-stable, and could be eaten in one mouthful without producing crumbs. Each square was essentially a small, dense brick of cooked bacon, pressed together and coated to stay intact. Astronauts loved them, genuinely loved them. The Gemini missions carried them as a standard breakfast item, and crew members requested extras. For men eating pureed beef from toothpaste tubes, a bite of something that actually tasted like bacon was the difference between enduring a mission and enjoying one. Small victories matter at 200 miles up. Everybody knows freeze-dried ice cream. You have seen it in every science museum gift shop in America. That chalky, crumbling block of artificial astronaut ice cream that dissolves on your tongue like flavored chalk dust. Here's the thing nobody tells you. It almost never actually flew. The Smithsonian lists it. The gift shops sell it. But the evidence that it was a regular part of any Apollo menu is thin at best. It flew possibly once, on Apollo 7 in 1968, and the crew was reportedly not impressed. The freeze-dried ice cream of your childhood imagination was mostly a marketing invention. What astronauts actually ate for dessert was fruitcake. I will come back to that. And yes, I said fruitcake. Stay with me. Number 21st, early paced food and the dignity problem. The engineers who designed Mercury program food were brilliant people who had solved impossible problems: rocket propulsion, re-entry heat shields, orbital mechanics. And then they handed a human being a tube of pureed pot roast and called it lunch. The disconnect was total. NASA's own psychological evaluations from the early 1960s noted that astronauts consistently ranked food quality and mealtime experience as one of their top morale concerns, above equipment discomfort and below only communication with family. Eating is not just fuel. Every culture on Earth figured that out 10,000 years ago. It took NASA about 4 years of watching astronauts squeeze beef paste into their mouths before the agency started listening. Number 20. Rehydratable meals and the improvement era. By the time the Gemini program was running in the mid-1960s, NASA had moved from tubes to bite-sized cubes and then to rehydratable pouches. You injected water through a valve, kneaded the pouch for a few minutes, and cut it open to eat with a spoon. The food actually held together in zero gravity better than anyone expected because surface tension kept moist food on the spoon long enough to get it to your mouth. The menu expanded dramatically: shrimp cocktail, chicken and vegetables, beef with gravy, and butterscotch pudding. None of it was restaurant quality, but it was recognizable as food, which after the toothpaste tube era was a genuine improvement worth celebrating. In 1965, NASA banned crumbly foods from spacecraft almost entirely, and cornbread was specifically called out in internal memos as a high-risk item. A single crumb floating free in a pressurized cabin could lodge in an instrument panel, get inhaled by a crew member, or work its way into an air filter. The engineers were not wrong, but for astronauts from the South, and there were many, the cornbread ban landed like a personal insult. You have left Earth. You are moving at 17,000 miles per hour, and someone has taken your cornbread. Several Apollo astronauts from Texas and Georgia listed cornbread as the first thing they planned to eat after splashdown. That specific detail shows up in more than one post-mission interview, and I find that deeply human. Number 18. Tortillas replace bread. The solution to the cornbread problem and to the regular bread problem was the flour tortilla. They were soft, flexible, low crumb, and able to wrap around fillings without disintegrating. NASA started flying tortillas on shuttle missions in the 1980s, and they never looked back. The tortilla became the unofficial bread of the American space program so thoroughly that the tortilla supply aboard the International Space Station became its own small economy. Astronauts traded them, saved them, and used them for everything from wrapping rehydrated chicken to eating peanut butter straight from the package. One crew member described the International Space Station tortilla supply as the only currency that actually mattered up there. I believe him completely. Number 17. Shrimp cocktail. Ask any astronaut from the Apollo era what their favorite space food was, and a statistically surprising number of them will say shrimp cocktail. Not steak, not a home-cooked meal. Shrimp cocktail. The freeze-dried shrimp rehydrated better than almost any other protein NASA tested, holding their texture in a way that chicken and beef rarely managed. The cocktail sauce was thermostabilized and came in a separate pouch. The combination worked. It tasted like something from an actual restaurant, or at least close enough that after days of rehydrated beef and rubber-flavored tang, it felt like a banquet. Neil Armstrong requested it on Apollo 11. The man walked on the moon and came back to eat shrimp cocktail. That is a detail that deserves more attention than it gets. Number 16. Thermostabilized beef and what that actually means. Thermostabilization sounds like something from a science fiction novel, but it is essentially the space-age version of canning. Food is heated to a specific temperature, sealed in flexible pouches, and rendered shelf-stable without refrigeration for months or years. The beef products NASA flew were technically edible and nutritionally complete. Whether they were enjoyable is a separate conversation. Astronaut Jack Loosma, who flew on Skylab in 1973, described thermostabilized beef as something that required a person to decide in advance to enjoy it. meaning it was a mental exercise as much as a culinary experience. You committed to the idea that it was good, and then you ate it. And it was fine, more or less. Number 15. Jellied pike perch, Soviet space food. Soviet cosmonauts flew with jellied pike perch in their food kits. It was a cold-set fish dish that would not have looked out of place on a Moscow dinner table in 1962. The gelatine kept the fish intact in zero gravity. The flavor was exactly what you would expect from jellied fish eaten out of a foil pouch while orbiting the Earth at 18,000 miles per hour. One NASA food technician described it as an acquired taste that she had not managed to acquire in the time available. American astronauts who visited Soviet facilities and sampled the food reportedly had very mixed reactions. The cosmonauts ate it without complaint. Home is where the fish jelly is, apparently. In the early 1970s, NASA experimented with irradiation as a food preservation method. They bombarded meat products with radiation to sterilize them without heat. Technically, it worked. The food lasted, the bacteria died, and from a safety standpoint, the technology was sound. The problem was the smell. Irradiated meat produced a distinctive odor during preparation that several astronauts described with language we cannot repeat here. The Skylab crews, who were served the experimental irradiated menu items, sent back feedback that was pointed enough to halt the program within 2 missions. In an enclosed spacecraft with recycled air, that smell became an experience that bonded crews in the specific way shared suffering does. They did not bond positively. Number 13. Fruitcake in space. I told you I would come back to the fruitcake. Fruitcake is the food that Americans mock as the indestructible doorstop of the holiday season. The joke writes itself. And yet fruitcake flew on multiple NASA missions because it was almost perfectly designed for space travel. Dense, calorie-rich, low in crumb production, and shelf-stable for years without refrigeration or special packaging. The exact same properties that make it the object of 1,000 jokes made it genuinely useful 200 miles above the Earth. Apollo 11 carried fruitcake. So did several Skylab missions. Astronauts ate it without irony because, when the alternative was thermostabilized beef, fruitcake starts looking pretty good. I think the fruitcake deserves a formal apology from the American public. I am issuing mine now. Number 12. Soviet cognac and the smuggling tradition. The Soviet space program had a complicated official relationship with alcohol and an entirely uncomplicated unofficial one. Cognac was smuggled aboard Soviet spacecraft with a regularity that suggests it was less of a secret than an open cultural negotiation. Cosmonauts tucked small flasks into personal item allowances. Ground crew looked in other directions. The tradition was rationalized as medicinal, which is how Russians have rationalized cognac since approximately the 1600s. NASA's official position on alcohol in space was zero tolerance, and they mostly maintained it. The Soviets maintained a different kind of zero questions asked. Skylab, launched in 1973, was the first American space station and the first spacecraft to have something approaching an actual kitchen. It included a food heating unit that warmed pouches to a proper temperature, a table with foot restraints so astronauts could sit still long enough to feel like they were eating a meal instead of conducting a fueling operation, magnetic tray surfaces that kept utensils from floating away, and scissors for cutting food packages. It sounds minimal, because it was minimal. But after 14 years of astronauts squeezing tubes and rehydrating pouches with no surface to set anything down on, Skylab's galley was a revolution. The crews who lived there described mealtimes as the emotional center of the day, the 1 hour when they felt like people again instead of instruments. Number 10. Fresh food as luxury. The first time a fresh apple arrived aboard the International Space Station, the crew gathered around it. They passed it between them. They smelled it before anyone took a bite. A single fresh apple. This was in the early 2000s, when resupply missions could occasionally carry small amounts of fresh produce with a short shelf life. Astronauts described the smell of a fresh orange or a ripe tomato as something that hit them physically. The volatile organic compounds that give fresh fruit its smell are almost entirely absent from freeze-dried and thermostabilized food. After weeks of eating from foil pouches, smelling something that grew in soil under actual sunlight triggered something deep and involuntary. Several astronauts cried over fruit, and not one of them was embarrassed about it. Number 9. Hot sauce culture aboard the ISS. Long-duration spaceflight does something to human taste buds that nobody fully predicted. Fluid shifts in the body in zero gravity cause mild nasal congestion similar to a head cold, which dulls the sense of smell and therefore the perception of taste. Everything tastes flatter, blander, more like the pouch it came from, and less like the meal it is supposed to be. The solution that every single long-duration astronaut independently arrived at was hot sauce. Tabasco became the most requested condiment in the history of the American space program. NASA eventually developed a custom hot sauce formulation for ISS crews. Astronauts from countries that do not traditionally eat spicy food started requesting it anyway, because when your world has no gravity and no horizon and no wind, spice is the one sensation that cuts through and reminds your nervous system it is still alive. Number 8. M&M's in zero gravity. M&M's flew on shuttle missions as a snack item, and they became immediately legendary, not for how they tasted, but for how they moved. A single M&M released in zero gravity drifts in a slow, wobbling arc that astronauts described as irresistible. Crews spent measurable amounts of their leisure time releasing M&Ms into the cabin air and catching them in their mouths, a practice that mission controllers could track through the crew activity logs because it showed up as unscheduled free time. NASA never officially discouraged it. Morale is a mission parameter. If catching floating candy in your mouth at 200 miles up is what keeps your crew functioning, then the M&Ms are earning their weight allowance. Number 7. Christmas dinner in space. The Apollo 8 crew spent Christmas Eve of 1968 orbiting the moon. They read from Genesis, they photographed Earthrise, and they ate individually packaged turkey with gravy, cranberry sauce, and fruitcake from foil pouches, floating in the command module while the entire world listened on the radio. NASA food technicians had prepared a special Christmas menu with particular care, knowing the mission date. The crews of subsequent holiday missions received similar treatment. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year missions were given upgraded menus with foods chosen specifically to feel festive. It was the agency's acknowledgement that ritual matters, that a holiday is still a holiday in lunar orbit, that human beings carry their traditions with them even into the places no human had ever gone before. I mentioned tortillas earlier, but they deserve their own entry because the tortilla situation aboard the International Space Station became genuinely sociological. Tortillas are produced by a specific vendor under NASA contract and delivered in batches with each resupply mission. Each astronaut receives a weekly allotment. The tortilla became a unit of informal trade. Astronauts who preferred other starches traded tortillas for better portions of dessert items. Crews negotiated over the last tortilla in a resupply batch the way office workers negotiate over the last parking space. One astronaut described spending 45 minutes of a rest period locating a tortilla she was certain a crewmate had taken. In space, 200 miles above every grocery store on Earth, a flour tortilla is serious business, and I fully respect that. Number 5. Astronaut personal preference items. NASA allows each astronaut a small weight allocation for personal preference food items, snacks and condiments, or specific foods that carry personal meaning and do not require special preparation. What astronauts chose to spend those precious grams on reveals more about human nature than any psychological evaluation. Tabasco sauce appeared constantly, and so did tortillas, beyond the standard allocation. One astronaut famously spent his entire personal food allowance on macadamia nuts and ate them every single day of a 6-month mission. Several Russian cosmonauts brought black bread from specific Moscow bakeries. One American astronaut brought a jar of his mother's homemade salsa, declared it by the packaging as hot sauce, and shared it with the entire crew, who described it as the best meal of the mission. The salsa made the official post-flight food report. Number 4. Alcohol attempts and the Great Beer Experiment. NASA's official position on alcohol has always been no. The fire risk in a pressurized oxygen environment, the dehydration concerns, the judgment impairment at altitude, every reason is legitimate and the policy is correct. That said, attempts were made. In the 1980s, Ballantine Brewing Company actually developed a low-foam beer specifically for potential space consumption, working with engineers to solve the carbonation problem in zero gravity, where gas does not separate from liquid the way it does on Earth. You would essentially burp liquid. The beer was developed. It was tested on reduced gravity aircraft flights. It was never officially approved for spaceflight. The project files exist in the NASA Historical Archive. The beer exists in history as the most expensive brew never consumed. I think someone should write a longer piece about it. Number 3. The meal every astronaut requested. Between 1970 and 1985, NASA's food logs show one item appearing on the personal preference request list more than any other. Not steak, not fresh fruit, not pizza, though several astronauts tried. The single most requested food item across that 15-year window was peanut butter. Plain, standard commercial peanut butter in a squeezable tube. The reasons are practical. Peanut butter is calorie-dense, requires no preparation, sticks to a tortilla without floating away, and tastes almost exactly the same in space as it does on Earth because its flavor compounds do not depend on aroma the way most foods do. The blunted taste buds that make everything else seem flat leave peanut butter essentially unaffected. In a world where everything tastes like the pouch it came from, peanut butter tastes like peanut butter. That reliability became something close to comfort. Astronauts ate it every day. They never got tired of it. Number 2. The Skylab Ice Cream. Skylab, 1973. The first American space station. The first spacecraft with a real galley. And the first spacecraft to successfully fly actual frozen ice cream, stored in a below-freezing food locker that maintained temperature throughout the mission. Not freeze-dried. Not the chalk block from the museum gift shop. Real ice cream. Frozen. Stored properly. Served cold. The Skylab crews ate it with spoons from small sealed containers, and every account of it describes the reaction the same way. Silence first. Then, something that sounds like relief. After weeks of foil pouches, rehydrated protein, and thermostabilized beef that required a mental commitment to enjoy, cold ice cream on a spoon tasted like Earth. It tasted like a Sunday afternoon in a kitchen somewhere, with people you loved. Several crew members noted it in their personal journals, not as a food entry, but as an emotional one. The ice cream was never standard issue on later missions because of power and storage constraints. The crews that came after Skylab ate freeze-dried ice cream from gift shop blocks and called it fine. The Skylab crews knew the difference, and they never forgot it. Number 1. The corned beef sandwich that almost ended a mission. We are back where we started. March 1965. Astronaut John Young, flying on Gemini 3 alongside Gus Grissom, reached into his suit pocket during the mission's second orbit and produced a corned beef sandwich he had purchased 2 days earlier from a deli in Cocoa Beach, Florida. He offered half to Grissom. Grissom took a bite. Then both men noticed the crumbs. In zero gravity, breadcrumbs do not fall. They float. They drift toward instrument panels, air filters, electrical connections, and human lungs. Young hastily stowed the sandwich, but the damage was done in more ways than one. Mission Control found out. NASA management found out. And then Congress found out. Because in 1965, the space program was receiving billions of dollars in public funding, and a member of that program had smuggled a sandwich aboard a spacecraft, and the hearing that followed was conducted with the full seriousness that only a congressional committee investigating a deli sandwich can muster. Young was formally reprimanded. He later commanded Apollo 10 and Apollo 16 and became the chief of the astronaut office. He flew in space 6 times. He brought the sandwich up in interviews for the rest of his life, with a satisfaction he never bothered to hide. The corned beef sandwich became the most famous meal in the history of human spaceflight, not because it was dangerous, though it was. Not because it was delicious, though it probably was after days of tube food and tang, but because it was human. It was a man so far from home, he was orbiting the planet, deciding that what he needed was a sandwich from a deli he liked, and bringing it with him. That impulse is not reckless. It is the same impulse that made frontier women pack dried apples into wagon barrels, enslaved cooks slip biscuits into apron pockets, and soldiers carry their mother's recipe for cornbread into war. Food is memory and defiance and identity all at once. John Young knew that even if he could not have explained it in those terms. So he bought a sandwich. He went to space. He shared it with his crewmate, and 60 years later, we are still talking about it. So there you have it, 25 meals that fed the people who left the planet and who still needed to feel human while they were gone. From toothpaste tubes of pureed beef to frozen Skylab ice cream to the corned beef sandwich that launched a congressional hearing. The food changed, but the need it answered never did. Drop a comment and tell me which one got you. If your father or your grandfather worked on the space program and came home with a story about what they actually ate up there, I want to hear every word of it. Hit subscribe for more Lost American stories. This is Carter with Retro USA Chronicles, and I will see you on the next one.